Okay, good morning. We're up to the bottom line on Tes Zion Omid Beis. A very light daf. I had we said if you stayed in, you became tummy inside, you have to go out the short way. If you go out the long way, right? Then you go out the long way, then you're going to be chayiv oil b'yared. It says if you're shah, right? Shah k'dei ishtachaviyah. So we said that meant if you went towards the east, but if you went towards the west, any hashtachava would be considered shahiyah. Okay, so a few questions on that. It's shilas based upon those yisoides. Boy Rava, 2 lines from the bottom. Boy Rava, tzarich shahiyah lemalkus, or ain't tzarich shahiyah lemalkus. We've been discussing the halachas of Eilav Yored for a carbon. The question is din of shahiyah when you become tamei? Is this a shear just for Eilav Yored? Or we can extend it, and this would shear be also for Malchus as well. Says the Rashi in the bottom. In Hisru boy, if you go ahead and warn him, Shlei Lamoid to not stand there, for Amar and he stands there, Pachas Mikadei Shahiyah, less than the shear Shahiyah. And we saw the shear Shahiyah yesterday was Machlokes reading that pasuk, the whole pasuk or part of the pasuk, right? That was the shear Shahiyah. So is this halacha of Shahiyah unique to Eilav Yored and Shaygeg, or even as Malchus as well? Okay. I ain't sorry, Shil Malchus. The carbon Gemiri Shahia, the Malchus like Gemiri Shahia. For carbon, we have Messiah Allah Chamash Sinai. For Shahia, I don't know Bifnim Gemiri. The Halach Chamash Sinai is going on inside. Bifnim Gemiri Shahia. Leishna the carbon, Leishna the Malchus. So is it a din in the carbon? Is it a din mad in the Shogeg versus Mazid? Or is it a din inside? If it's din inside, then the Shia would apply to the Malchus. If it's a din only the chi of carbon, would only apply to the chi of carbon. On that, the Gemara says, Teku, we have to wait for Tishri, Yitaras, Kushas, and Abayas. We have to wait for Eliyahu. Boy Rava, Tala Atzmai Ba'ava Azara. Let's say a person he's suspended in the Azara. I don't know if he's hanging by a rope, but he's not on the floor. In other words, the main point is he's incapable of going ahead and bowing down. He's incapable of going ahead and bowing down. Okay. Maho. Ki gemir shehiyah debas ishtachaveh. It's shehiyah that you have the capacity to go ahead and bow. The lav bas ishtachaveh loy gemiri. Idilma b'fnim shehiyah gemiri. Loishna debas ishtachaveh. Loishna the lav bas ishtachaveh. Again, a similar shaila. Is it din inside, or is it din in the capability of what? Of like the first shaila was the din of carbon versus mazid. Here's the shaila whether it physically bowing down or not. Or no, it's a din of bifnim. And the Gemara in that says, Teku, we have to wait again. Boy Ravashi, Tima atzmai b'mezid, right? That person's matam himself b'mezid, mahu. Ba'oinis gemiri shehiyah b'mezid like gemiri shehiyah. I don't b'fnim gemiri shehiyah leishna ba'oinis leishna b'mezid. So a person's inside, he's matam himself, right? Rashi says, V'imtim saloim at tzarch shehiyah l'malkis. If you're going to answer the shaila, that notice this is an imtim saloim, it's contingent upon the first shaila. If you're going to tell me there is a din of shehiyah l'malkis, Tum ba'oinis u'shehiyah b'mezid. All right. Tum b'mezid mine. Ba'ilach shi'aloi. So in other words, when was the malchus? That was only b'shoigeg. What happens b'mezid? So guys, so the first shaila we had, is there a din of shehiyah le'inyan only le'inyan carbon or even le'inyan malchus? If you're going to insert, it's le'inyan malchus that there's din of shehiyah, is that only a hechatimsa where your tumah came about machmas and oinis? What would the din be if your tumah came about machmas b'mezid? Would this din apply? In other words, Rashi tells us that this is contingent upon the first shaila. It's not a separate shaila by itself. It's contingent upon being poishit, the first shaila, that there is such a musig as the malchus for b'mezid. And if it's true, is that only tumah that you contract ba'oinis, or even tumah that you contract b'mezid? And that Gemara says teku. Okay. Now new shaila. This din of shehiyah in tumah, is it a din unique to the kayin l'chayr in the Beis Hamikdash? Any person in the Beis Hamikdash? Any person lav dafka kayin? Or we can extend it to the other parsha of tumah, which is the parsha of the nazir. We're all aware that a nazir is not able to go ahead and contract the tumas mace. So now, boy Ravashi, nazir b'kever. A nazir is in a cemetery. A nazir b'keva, boy shehil malchus ain't tzarich, or ain't tzarich. Okay, well now what's the shaila? Guys, did he walk into the cemetery? If you walk into the cemetery, he's chayiv right away for walking in. So it must be that what? Similar to Ashayla, that he contracted Tumah in the cemetery. But how's that possible to contract Tumah in the cemetery? In other words, how do you get into the cemetery without being Tumah and only getting Tumah when you're in the cemetery? So look at Rashi. Naza bekever, naza shenitma ba'oinis, mitoich beis hakvaris. Dumya de nitma ba'azara. Shaloi nischayev, right? Bichnisasai, kigoin. Shenichnes the beis hakvaris, b'shida tevla migdal. One of the famous shida tevla migdal, type of different, a carriage, some type of area, like a carriage, or being carried in. He goes ahead and he opens it up, and now the tumah is going to be what? Be nichnes, oil. V'nimtza ba'avir beis hakvaris. For history boy says, they say get out. V'lo yatzin, he doesn't leave. He doesn't stay the share of what? Of bowing down. Okay, so very interesting shaila. Rashi explains the shaila. It's simply to create the mitzias of the shaila. Right? How is it possible for the nazir to be contract tumah in a beis hakvaris without contracting it as soon as he walks in? He goes in a shida teva migdal, and then so now he's tahar. His friend takes the oil off. Now the tumah comes in, and they say, "Get out." Is there a din of shehiyah or not? Right? That's the one. In other words, the shaila is the din of shehiyah of tumah only in the Beis Hamikdash, or does it extend tumah to other places as well? So that's the shaila. By Ravashi, Nilson Bekev by Shil Malchus in a Serch, Penim Gemiri Shehia Bechutz like Gemiri Shehia. I deal with Ba'inus Gemiri Shehia Leishna Befnim Leishna Bechutz, and the Gemara remains smart be Teku. Gemara remains smart with a Shaila. Rashi says, Sar Shil Malchus Aloy Korban Leishayachacha Klau. Shein Karis Ben Nazir Shenitma. There's no Karis by a Nazir, so Mela. There's no Karis. There's no oil of yard. There's no Korban. The carbon nazir tamei lav oven tuma asi. The carbon of a nazir tamei is not because on the oven of tuma. It comes to go ahead and restart his naziris. Elo mechel and naziris tahira. To be chalat naziris tahira kisham mechusay kapara. Obinyan zem before shehiyazu mesech nazir. Okay, just boy loy barucha chayev b'ktsar prat. Okay, guys, here's the lamda shashayla. You're in is it, let's say you're inside the Beis Hamikdash. We said if you leave the short way, you're going to be pata from a carbon. If you leave the long way, you're going to be chayiv a carbon. What happens if you leave the long way in the period of time it would take you to leave the short way? In other words, let's say you get up and you run. So let's say it would take you a minute or 2 minutes to get out of the short way, and the long way would take you 5 minutes. However, you ran, and now you're able to get out the long way. In other words, is this a time thing, or is it a set thing? That if you go out the long way, you're chayiv regardless, and if you go out the short way, you're going to be your putter unless you stop and stay the share of shehiyah. That's the shaila, guys. In other words, is this din a din contingent upon time? Well, no, this is a din, it has nothing to do with time, it has everything to do with how did you go out. You went out the short way, you went out the long way, and now, if that's the case, fellas, what happens if you went out the short way and you took your merry time? You hear? Fellas, what happens if you went out the short way and you took your merry time? If you're telling me it's not contingent upon time, you'll be pata. I went out the short way. Again, if it's a time thing, then l'chayra, if it's a time thing, then you should be able to go out the long way, provided it doesn't take you any longer than it would take you to go out normally the short way. But if it's not contingent upon time, it's a din in makom, then l'chayra, no matter how fast you go out the long way, you're going to be chayiv. No matter how long you go out the short way, you're going to be pata. Guys, and that's the ladder. What I just told you is the Gemara, is the ladder tzad. If you go out the long way, no matter, regardless, you can be chayiv. If you go out the short way, regardless, it's going to be pata. It's fascinating. Says the Gemara. Boloi baruch chayiv b'kitsara pata. Amarava. Kitsara sha'amru. When we say kitsara, afilu okev b'tzad gadol. You know, guys, when you're walking toe to heel, right? Heel to toe. So you're walking like this, right? You know, you're not walking one in front of the other. You're walking heel to toe. So you're walking obviously very, very, very short, taking a really long time. Vafilu kolayim kula, even the whole day. So Rav's psak gives us an insight that has nothing to do with time. It's a din, short way, and that's the only way. Long way, that's not. That's the din. So fascinating. Rashi, let's see Rashi here. I feel kolayim kula, shah malichasai. Even the whole day, he's shah while he's walking. That's the key. He's going out very, very slowly. Pata. He's pata. He's pata. Now, guys, the key here over here is he doesn't stop walking. He's walking, but very slowly, but he's always walking. So now, boy Rava, shehiyos mahu sheit starfu. What's the din if they're mitzaref? Rashi, hayotze b'gtzara. Now, you have the share of Ishtachava, correct? That's the share. V'shah ma'at. V'chazav v'halach derech yitziyasai. V'shah ma'at. Ma'u sheyitztarfu l'kashir. In other words, when you stopped, you didn't stop the share of Ishtachaviyah. You continued on. Then you stopped. If you could, you combine all the stoppings to be the share of Shehir or not. Good. So the Gemara says, V'tifshet lo midi day. Why wasn't Rava poishit from his own psak that you can take your time going out? Rashi, that they don't combine. So you see, it's not mitzdarf the mekayu a carbon. Guys, what's the difference? Guys, what's the difference? By Rava going out, he never stopped. He never stopped. There's nothing to him mitzdarf. There was no shehiyah. The zman, again, remember, this whole thing is not predicated on zman. He never stopped. Here he stopped. So therefore, you can't be poishit from the case of what? Going toe to heel to toe and taking his time. Says the Gemara, Hasam b'delay shah. Over there, it's speaking b'delay shah, when he was going, he didn't waste time at all. Okay. Boy mine abaye me rabba. Right? Boy mine abaye me rabba. Now, it's very fascinating. Guys, how many Rav and Abaye and Shas a million times? Rab and Abaye a million times. Look what Rashi goes to tell you tonight. Boy mine rabba. Says Rashi, Boy mine abaye me rabba. Bar nachmeni. Shohaya rabbi. V'chalechad ikka boy mine rabba. Who? V'lay rava. Why Rashi has to tell you Masech Shevuous? I guess the dialogue here is funny because it's boy Rava. Rava is asking a shaila, so therefore, you shouldn't get mixed up. Rashi felt it's important to tell you now. This is not Rava. This is Rabbi Bar Nachmani. This is Rabbi. And you always have to wonder why Rashi at this point in time. What Rashi does, what he does. There's always a reason for it. Rashi. So I thought maybe because you can get fablunjit with the boy Rav is then. Abaye is, if you go according if you go just according to the flow, you might think he's speaking to Rava. So because often the Gemara does change Rabba and Rava. So he's telling you, boy mine abaye me Rabba. Ba'aloi ba'arucha shir kitsara. He goes out the long way. The shir it would take you to go out the short way. Rashi, guys. Ba'aloi ba'arucha kashir kitsara. Sheyatza b'derech ha'arucha. He's going out the long way. Aval rutz b'merutza actually shah b'yitziyasai el kitshir derech kitsara b'hilach beinani mahu. So I would be poished that l'chayri should be chayiv. According to everything we said until now, if it's not contingent upon time, if it's contingent only about what? Now, Rav is the one who said that, guys. Abaye is asking Rabba. That also might be why Rashi said it. In other words, according to Rava, it pretty much, you see it doesn't contingent upon time because the Rav is heel to toe case. So if it's not contingent upon time, once you take the scenic route, so to say, you're going to be chayiv. Even if what? You motor, even if you're Bullet Bob Hayes. I'm dating myself. Even if you're Usain Bolt, right? You're going, you're moving out. So, okay. Mahu. Shir Gemiri, V'chi Boloi Barucha Shir Ketzara Pata. Dilma Dafka Gemiri, Barucha Chai B'Ketzara Pata. That's it. In other words, is it a din and share? This is the Hakdama I gave you. Is it a din and share in Zman, or it's a din and Mitzias that you can't go out that way? That's the shaila that he asked Rabba. So what did Rabba answer him? Rabba told him, the long way wasn't given out for its share, but even if you run out, you're going to be chayiv. In other words, this is to be consistent with Rav's din. If you go out the long way, there's no way in the world you're going to be potter. Why? Because you made the wrong choice. You made the wrong choice. You made the wrong choice. That's Maskal or Rabbi. Okay, guys, so good. You good? Again, you're going out the long way, but you're going out the long way, and the shear would take you the short way. So if you go out the short way, you'd be pata. Would you say you're pata going out the long way? And says Rabbi Tebai, no. Once you choose the long way, it has nothing to do with time. You're going to be chayiv, because the long way is. How about the long way is no way? Good. The long way is no way. Good. Now, says the Gemara, Maskevla, we have a Maskevla Reb Zera. So according to you, that there's no share of Zman. There's no share of Zman. Good? In other words, it's just, the din is just as I. Ella the Kaimelon, we saw in Masechta Sanhedrin, in the Mishnah of Misi B'dei Shemayim, Tamesh Sheshimesh, a kind that does the Avodah, it gets Misi B'dei Shemayim. A Tameh, that's Mishamish, gets Misi B'dei Shemayim, which is a Dargalet less than Karis. Heichim Mishkachaslo. How will you ever have a case of a Tameh that's Mishamish and what? And it's going to be Misi B'dei Shemayim without being Karis. In other words, we're looking now based upon your din, your psak, that the law, there's not a share in Zman, but rather it's a share what? In givens. What's the given? Long way chayiv, guys, and here's the key. Short way hishtachava. Guys, short way hishtachava. Yechayiv, right? Yechayiv. So let's like this. If you're going to tell me it's a din in Zman, let's say short way hishtachava would take you 3 minutes. So you got 3 minutes to get out. It's possible then to say to do an avodah in that Zman of time. But if you're telling me that no, it has nothing to do with Zman, it has to do with what? With you go the short way with Shtachava, how is it possible to do avodah by walking out the short way with it's impossible that you'll be able to go ahead and do an avodah, pashtus, within that framework, says the Gemara. Hechim mishkachasla. If you did the avodah and you didn't say the share and what you did, hechi avar avodah. How could you have done avodah in Tuma in that period of time? V'idishah, and if you did go ahead and stay that period of time, bar karis who you're not going to get misa b'dei shemayim, you're going to get karis. Notice we have a mitzvah shaila over here. Bishlei tevi, tell me it's time, so I have a time frame where if I get within that time frame, it'll be Misa B'dei Shemayim. Beyond that time frame, it's Karis. But if you're telling me it's not a time frame, it's simply what you're going out the short way, and the share of Shehiyah, there's not possible in that framework to possibly go ahead and not be what Chayiv Karis, rather than Misa B'dei Shemayim. That's the Gemara's problem over here. Let's see it again. Maskal Rabbi Zera, Allah the Kaimelon Tamesh Shemish B'Misa Misa B'dei Shemayim Hechim Mishkachasla Idolei Shah. If you didn't delay, meaning you went out so quickly, hechi avad avodah. If you did shah, and if you did was shah, bakarasu, you're bakaras, not misa. If you're telling me it's a zman of time, mishkachasla, the honest nafshe b'ktsara v'avad avodah. He mamish hightailed it through the shortcut, guys. It should take 3 minutes. It took him a minute, and he had 2 minutes to do the avodah. If you're telling me it's not contingent on time, but rather what? The going out the short way vishtachava, it's not possible then. It's not possible then that to have avoid in that period that framework. To not be chayv kares. Guys, again, you're telling me you have to be chayv misa b'dei shemayim. I know if I have a framework, I can possibly do the following. If there's a time span, I could do the avodah, be hightailed out of it, all in the zman of what before I'm going to be chayiv kares. So, and you be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim for doing the avodah. On the other hand, if you're telling me it's derech katsara, has nothing to do with time, it's just going out that way, and you know what you have to do? That little short period of what of shehiyah, of bowing down, there's no possible to avoid in that period of time. and therefore I'm going to be chayiv kares rather than misa. So Rav Zeir is asking a lum de shekasha on Rabbah. If you're telling me it's not a time framework, I don't have a metzias of a tamei doing the avodah to be chayiv misa rather than kares. If he's like if he's shah, he's chayiv kares. If he's shah, he's chayiv kares, and if he's not shah, he can't possibly do the avodah. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaya, my kushya. Abaya says to Rav Zera, what's your kasha? Mishkachas lokegoin sheba b'ketzara. He's going out the short way. Now, guys, so once he's going out the short way, what do we need? We need less than a shahiyah, less than what? Bowing down. Guys, right? He's going out the short way. All we need to now do is less than bowing down. V'hapach b'tzinura. And he goes ahead, and with a fork, he turns over the piece of meat. Rav Huna, Rav Huna, Zar Einan Kohen Shahafach B'Tzinura, who takes the fork and turns over a piece of meat. Chayiv Misa, he be Chayiv Misa B'Dei Shemayim. So I gave you the answer, guys. Look, you thought it's not possible, guys. Eye contact. You thought it's not possible to walk out the door without a time frame, and now all you need is what? Is hishtachave, and you couldn't do an avoid in that time. I just created a scenario. You're walking out the door, you take a tziner, a fork, you turn it over, and you continue walking. That's the same as what? As bowing down. So, and if you do that, you'll be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim rather than kares. So it says Abaya, your kasha Reb Zeir is not a kasha. And therefore, Rabbi's premise that it's not a time-based thing, it's rather a framework, a share-based thing, fulfilling either going the long way or the short way, that's it. So far we're good. The Gemara now digresses to go ahead and analyze itself the halacha of a zar turning over the meat. Okay? Gufa, Amarav, Huna, zar shahabach betzinora, a zar that goes ahead and he turns over the meat. He turns it over. Chai misa is chai misa b'shemayim. The zar is not allowed to do the avoid. If he does, it's chai misa b'shemayim. Hey chidami, what exactly? Why do you consider this avoida? If you didn't turn it over, it wouldn't be consumed by the fire. Pshita. What's the chiddush of Rav Huna? Guys, what's he telling me? Of course it's an avoida. It wouldn't be done, the meat wouldn't be digested, it wouldn't be burnt up unless you turned it over. And if you did not go ahead and turn it over, it also would have been what? Consumed. My kovid, what did he do? So either it's pasha that it's an avoida, or it's not an avoida at all, depending upon whether it would be been burnt up or not. And for the Gemara, Rav Huna says, if you didn't turn it over, it would go ahead and get burnt in 2 hours. And now it's getting burned in 1 hour. So what's the chiddush? Anyone that makes the avodah take place earlier, that's an avodah. That's Rav Huna's chiddush. Very good chiddush. It's not pshat it wanted to get burnt at all. It was going to get burnt, but it get burnt at a little time. So it's pasha. Then what did he do? I'll tell you what he did. He made it get burnt earlier, and the chiddush is getting burnt earlier. Does haste an avodah. Amr v'shaya, ba'ina the ema milsa. I want to ask something. Umistapina michavre, and I'm scared from my friends. I want to say something, and I'm scared they're going to ask me kashas, which is a mud in the Gemara, so don't say it. In other words, if they're going to ask you kashas and you don't have the answers to the kashas, why are you saying in the first place? Hanichnis the bias hamanuga. You go into a house that has a kretz. It's a house that has tziras, and we know a person who goes in the house that gets tziras, he's tamei. Derech achayra, but he's walking in backwards. Vafilu kula, even if his whole body is in, chutz mechaytmai, with the exception of his nose. Tahar. His whole body's in. The only thing that's out is his nose. He be tahar. Tichsiv v'abal abayis. Derech bia asra Torah. Derech bia asra Torah. Okay, so this is Rabbi Shaya's din. That if your whole body's in the house and your nose is outside of the house because you walked in backwards, it's not called a haba. It's not. You didn't walk in the normal way. It's dafka when you walk in the normal way. You didn't walk in the normal way. Now, why was the kasha that Rav Oishi was scared they were going to ask him? Right? Umistafina mechavre ihachi kulanami. So if it's contingent upon walking in, so what happens if you would have walked in, guys, and backwards, and you would have been totally in the house? Then you should be tahar. But it's only because your nostrils are outside that you're tahar. This is the question that they was scared he was going to be asked. So pshat's like this, guys. Listen, pshat. Rabbi Shaya had a Messiah from his Rebbe on this din. He had a Messiah. He heard from his Rebbe like this, guys. He heard from his Rebbe, if you walk into this house with your nose out, you're tahar. But he didn't know the reason. I mean, he knew that you're walking in. There was a kasha, but he never got Messiah from his Rebbe on the teretz. So he's repeating what he heard from his Rebbe, but he's scared they're going to ask a kasha that he didn't have a teretz to, but he knew the kasha's there. Rav is going to fataish the teretz. Rav now will give it the teretz. In other words, the din is azoi. Itaka is azoi. If you walk in backwards, if you walk in and your nostrils are outside, you're tahar. However, if you're totally inside, you're tamei. What's the difference? You walked in backwards either way. Amarava kula loigara mikael shebabayis. If you walk in, you're going to be tamei, but guys, you're not going to be tamei because you walked in backwards and it usurps the din. That's not the reason. You know why you're going to be tamei? You're going to be simply tamei. Everything's in the house. Once you're in the house, regardless of how you got in there, you're no different than a kli in the house. You'll be a shtick holz. You're in the house. That's what it is. As long as you're not in the house, it's totally in derech how you came in. Once you're in the house, we don't care how you came in. Says Rava. So don't be scared. Here's the kasha and here's the teretz. Your nose is outside. You're not totally in the house. We want to be metami you derech bia. You need to come in derech bia yatar. When you're totally in the house, you can ask a kasha, why are you tamei? You came in backwards. Once you're in the house, we don't care how you got there. Just like the Kalim and Ganser in the house, here you're Ganser in the house, you're going to be tamei. Tanya Nami Hachi, Gagan Halalu, Ein Oichlin Sham Kodesh Kedoshim. They weren't Kodesh, the Gagim of the Beis Hamikdash. On the Gag, you couldn't eat Kodesh in the Azara. If you're on the Gag in the Azara, you couldn't eat there. Vein Shoichlin Sham Kodesh Kalim doesn't have a din in Yerushalayim vis-a-vis shechting. Not Yerushalayim. You can eat in Yerushalayim. Kodesh Kalim is shechting b'chol mocham ba'Azara, but not on top of the roof. The Tamei shenichnas derech Gagin lehechel pata. And Tamei goes in through the roof is pata. Shenemar ve'lemigdash le'savai. Derech bia asra Torah. Derech bia the Torah asks you. Derech bia the Torah asks you.
Rabbi Stern?
Yes.
So why, if it's all totally on just not being totally in the Mikdash, why did the case have to be where he walked in backward with his nose out? He could have walked in forward with his hand sticking out.
No. Again, derech bia means you go with your nose. The nose is the criteria. Your nose is the criteria of when you walk in somewhere, you go nose first. Because it's the first part of your body that goes.
But he could have walked in nose first, but just left his hand out. And the halacha.
Once he walked in nose first, he's in. He would be tamei already. As long as he walked in, you don't need his whole body in the avi. You don't need his whole body. Once he walked in with his nose first, you don't need the whole body. It's only because he didn't walk in. I have something written down on the side over here that I didn't get a chance to look at. Let's hang on a second, maybe. Okay.